du Cercle du Libre Examen de l'Alliance des universités de Bruxelles et du Vrij Onderzoek. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue et je déclare notre journée des Lumières. Pourquoi on a fait ça? En fait, c'est une initiative à l'origine entre le Vrij Onderzoek, le Librex et la Brussels University Alliance. C'était en fait d'essayer de rassembler, de travailler entre les communautés dites francophones bruxelloises et néerlandophones, entre libres penseurs. Parce qu'on s'est dit, dans le contexte actuel de tension linguistique, si ce n'est pas les libres penseurs qui donnent l'exemple, qui le fera. On s'est dit qu'on va essayer de créer une occasion pour se voir au-delà de la Saint-V, où souvent on ne se rappelle pas des conversations qu'on a eues dans la main. Et on s'est dit, on va travailler ensemble pour essayer de construire. Construire, on s'est dit, avec la conjoncture excellente qui a fait que la Semaine des Lumières qui commence ici à la VUB, on s'est dit, quelle meilleure occasion si ce n'est de la commencer avec la Journée des Lumières sur laquelle on va travailler ensemble.
Dus namens Vrij Onderzoek en onze Franstalige tegenhangers Librex wensen wij u welkom op de Dag van het Licht. De Dag van het Licht is een nieuwe initiatief van Librex en Vrij Onderzoek in samenwerking met de Brussels University Alliance om de twee universiteiten in samenwerking te doen komen rond het vrijdenken. Dit is dus de eerste editie die wij eigenlijk rond het kader van de week van de verlichting die volgende week eigenlijk gebeurt. Die volgende week gebeurt en we dachten van ja, dit is de juiste opportuniteit om een samenwerking te maken tussen de vrijdenkenden van Franstalige en Nederlandstalige zijde van Brussel. En we hebben daardoor heel actuele en heel relevante thema's gekozen, namelijk Syrië, de vluchtelingencrisis en natuurlijk jihad.
Comme Roméo vient de le dire, on a choisi deux ateliers, deux workshops durant l'après-midi, puis il y aura un repas convivial à prix libre, avant de passer à la représentation de la pièce Jihad. Le premier atelier qu'on vous a proposé, c'est un état des lieux de la crise en Syrie, avec monsieur Eric David et monsieur Mohammad Salman qui nous ont fait l'honneur d'accepter ce soir. Mohammad Salman, qui est spécialiste de relations internationales, il est chercheur assistant au département de sciences politiques à la VUB. Il est spécialiste des grandes puissances, des relations Chine-Moyen-Orient, Chine-États-Unis. Il est actuellement coordinateur du projet Welcome Student Refugees Program, ici à la VUB. Monsieur Eric David, professeur de droit international chez nous à l'ULB, il a été dans la commission consultative du droit international humanitaire depuis 1996, je pense qu'il est toujours, et il a assuré des consultations pour les Nations Unies, le Conseil de l'Europe, le gouvernement belge, le Sénat, la Chambre, et j'en passe.
Dus dit eerste workshop gaat over de conflicten in Syrië, gevolgd door de tweede workshop binnen 1,5 uur over de refugee crisis, of de vluchtelingencrisis in Europa. Vandaag zijn we blij jullie, Mohammad Salman en Eric David te laten spreken. Mohammad Salman is een specialist in internationale relaties. Hij is onderzoeker en assistent aan de faculteit Politieke Wetenschappen aan de VUB. En hij is ook gespecialiseerd in de relaties tussen China en de Midden-Oosten, maar ook tussen China en de Verenigde Staten. Hij is tevens ook coördinator van de Welcome Student Refugees Program, die de vluchtelingen-studenten aan de VUB verwelkomt. Dan hebben we Eric David, een grootste dokter in internationaal recht aan de ULB. Hij is ook expert in de consultatieve commissie van internationaal mensenrecht. Hij dient ook aan de juridische raadpleging van de VN, in de Raad van Europa, van de Belgische regering, van het Senaat, van de Kamer en zoveel meer. We zijn blij dat wij deze grote sprekers aan u kunnen voorstellen en we hopen dat u daar veel van gaat genieten en veel informatie van dat zullen krijgen.
Thank you. In fact, I would like to speak about the situation in Syria as I saw it in my eyes. I am here, I was a PhD student here in Belgium. I arrived to Belgium in 2010. In that time, the crisis in Syria didn't start yet. The crisis started after that at the beginning of 2004. In that time, I watched the TV, I saw revolution, I saw many media about Syria, somebody died, the police killed somebody, I don't know. I speak with my family in Syria, I speak with my friend, I have hundreds of friends in Syria. They say to me, that's not true. What's happened in Syria, it's not, it's opposite what you say in the media. There is jihadists in Syria. So, okay, maybe I traveled to Syria in 2011 in summer. In that time, I go to the street in Syria, I didn't find any revolution. I went to Damascus, to Aleppo. In Homs, a little bit, there is some movement, and there is some people, they go to the street and say it publicly, we need Islamic State. We need Islamic State. While in the media here, they make them like revolution. I was surprised. Why? Why they make these people as a revolution and instead they would like they are, we could say, jihadists. They would like to arrive to Islamic State, Islamic government. They need something like Taliban government. I speak in that times when I come to here to Europe for many people, and I try to write some articles to publish what's happening in Syria. Honestly, no media in Europe accept to publish this idea. In that times, all the media here, they focus about one thing. There is a revolution in Syria. It was a little bit upset for me at the beginning. And after that, there is some bomb in Syria in the street. I heard from my close friends how it's the bomb come, how they put the car in the street, many people die. And finally, we watch the media here, we say revolution. What is this? Like exactly now what's happened in Paris before 3 months or 4 months. If you say in the media there is 9 revolution or 12 revolution, try to do revolution in Paris, and police in French police killed. I was really surprised at that time, but I felt it was like they prepare for something. Here in Europe, there is a democratic country. So, in general, government, if they would like to do something, they are afraid from public opinion. So, at the beginning, they try to control public opinion to say, there is revolution in Syria, and we would like to send weapons, or we would like to send our army, maybe NATO, to Syria to protect Syrian people, and not to support terrorists. In fact, we could say the media exactly what's happening is like this. I don't say Syrian government is the best. But if we look at this media, this map, look at the map of Middle East. Syria, okay, maybe dictator government. Iraq is not dictator government. Jordan, Saudi Arabia. Give me one of these government is not dictator government. All of them. So why Syria? This is the question. What's the difference between this dictator and this dictator? If we check Syria, I was in Syria until I was 27 years. In Syria, education is free. You can enter to the school is free. Health care is free. Okay, maybe the people not rich, but they are not poor at all. The economic situation was really good. And for politics, you could do what you would like, but you cannot speak bad about government, which I think is almost in each country. But if we compare it with another country like Egypt, like Jordan, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, we say it's more democratic than or less dictatorial than that country. So why would we like to change this government? What's the difference between government in Syria and the government in Saudi Arabia? The answer is, this government, and there's one government is friendly to United States, and the government is not friendly to the United States should be changed. And that's the reality. After that, after they control the media, honestly I speak what I saw, what I believe, what I connect from that Syrian view. After that, sorry for this photo, but the media it became like this. One, we will write articles and the other takes these articles. For example, Syrian government killed 30 persons, whatever. After that, they Syrian government, and they use in that times the passage, I don't know. For example, terrorists killed 20 persons in Syria, in Damascus, in bomb or something. They use there is revolution in Syria and 20 persons has been killed. 20 people has been killed. So they don't see directly the terrorists kill these people. And they don't see the government kill these people, to be honest. So what they do is the revolution in Syria and 20 people have been killed. So when you read these articles, you feel police kills these people. And that's not true. However, in that times, it's improved the situation in Syria, and you know, this group of terrorists is not enough. They start support another terrorist to travel to Syria. Thousands of terrorists came from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Europe, from here, and I don't believe these thousands of people travel to Syria without police feel anything. We don't speak about tens or hundreds, we speak about thousands of people travel to Syria, to jihadists, and they were supported by a lot of government. They were supported directly from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, beside Turkish, and not directly from another country. And here we could say in Belgium, news in 2013, in May, just it's short. In that times, European Union Parliament decided to send weapons for revolution in Syria, for rebel in Syria, the red rebel. And a lot of people, they say they are civil, or they are rebel, moderate rebel, or they are jihadists. In that time, many questions, and there is a lot of people they feel. But the problem, public opinion still controlled by the media until that time. I tried in that time to write articles, and one of these articles, this one, I wrote it in 2013. I speak in these articles about jihadists. You could read it, and you could read the last part of this article. I speak in that time, these jihadists will not stop in Syria. They will return to here. They will be dangerous for security, for national security of Europe. And many refugees will come from Syria if still this crisis in this country. Honestly, nobody accepted to publish. 2013, I read these articles. It's published in 2014, and in this journal, it's not big journal, they accept a little bit to speak about jihadists. In that time, the media, in general, journal, don't want to speak about jihadists. They would like just to speak about revolution, to make public opinion support this movement, or could be this jihadist in Syria, without they feel this support jihadists. After that, you know, I think the complete of the problem and what's happened, especially American government and French government, they really support in that times these jihadists, and they give them weapons. They send to them high technology, anti-tank, high technology weapon also. But you know after that how jihadists did the first attack in Charlie Hebdo, and after that the second attack recently in last November. And many of my colleagues in my department, because we are politics, we speak about that a lot, they said to me, you were completely right what you said before. But what we could do now? In fact, easy, just to stop support terrorists. Until now, this terrorist has been supported. Until now, Saudi Arabia or Qatar, maybe less now from European government, but European government support Saudi Arabia and support Qatar, support Turkish support this terrorist alliance. And don't believe Turkish government against ISIS and against this terrorist. Turkish government gave them a lot of weapons. But in front of the media, there is something else. They speak, we are against terrorists or something like that. And they speak now about Daesh. What's named Daesh or Islamic State, what's named. In fact, all this group, they were together. They want Islamic State. But they still working together until end of 2013 or beginning of 2014. In that time, they had for the leader of this group. So in that time, they separate for Daesh, Islamic State, and Jabhat al-Nusra. And Jabhat al-Nusra or al-Nusra front is not less dangerous from Islamic State. They are terrorists, they have the same radical ideas, the same ideology, exactly. But still until now, supported by Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Also Daesh, also Islamic State, until now is supported, but not publicly. Like this, just I give you a small idea about what's happened in my country. I said, or I would like to receive from you some question, or I would like to open conversation with you that would be more helpful to explain or to explain to you some idea or some idea not clear for you. Okay, thank you.
Voilà, je vais vous parler donc, comme on l'a demandé, de la Syrie et des problèmes de droit international que cela pose. Est-ce que cela vous ennuie que je parle en français ou vous préférez que je parle en anglais? Would you like me to speak in English? Because if mijn Nederlands is zeer zwak, it's much preferable that I speak in English if you prefer. Okay, so I do that. I'm going to present my presentation. Will address two parts. Firstly, we'll look at the nature of the conflict, which for the time being divides Syria, and secondly, what is the applicable law. Concerning the nature of the conflict, it's a very special situation, as you know, because at the very beginning we have a classic non-international armed conflict, a civil strife between the Syrian government and the rebels, the Syrian opposition against the government. And afterwards, there is a new actor which came in the picture, and it's Daesh, or the Islamic State. Can we say that is it still a non-international armed conflict when Daesh is involved in this conflict? And the answer is surely yes. Why do I insist on the nature of the conflict? The reason for my insistence on this question is because the law is not exactly the same in an international armed conflict and in a non-international armed conflict. Rules are different. And that's the reason why we have to deal with this question to begin with, to see what exactly is the application of public international law in the Syrian situation. So, as I told you, it's quite clear that the Syrian conflict, the Syrian war, is at the beginning a non-international armed conflict, and the things do not change because there is this intervention from the so-called Islamic State. Why there is no change, in spite of the fact that this force names itself, between quotation marks, Islamic State, it's because even if it is called Islamic State, it's not a state in the ordinary meaning of the word. It is also a movement which takes part in the conflict, but it's not a real state, because nobody in the world, no state in the world, no international organization has ever recognized the Islamic State as a state. And therefore you have non-state actors which are involved in the conflict. The only state actor is the Syrian government, who is supposed to be the representative of the Syrian state. However, today we have other interventions. You have interventions of foreign states, which are the United States, Russia, even if Russia decided now to withdraw from the conflict. You have interventions from France, from Saudi Arabia, as it was just said, and Iran also, and other states also take part in this conflict. And because of these interventions of other states, and interventions which are on two sides, either on the governmental side, like Iran or Russia to a certain extent. You have also interventions on the rebel side, like Turkey, for instance. And so because of these state interventions, it can be said that today the conflict became international. One of the consequences from a legal point of view of this internationalization of the conflict is the fact that military who are captured by one of the belligerents should get the status of prisoner of war if they fulfill the conditions which are provided for in the Geneva Conventions, and more especially in the third Geneva Convention, or in the first additional protocol of 1977 to these conventions. If the soldiers who are captured, who are arrested by the other side, as I told you, fulfill the conditions which are provided for in order to get this status of prisoner of war. I'm not going to enter the details. If you want, during the question time, it's possible for you to ask me questions about that, but I don't want to bother you with technical details for the time being. I just would like to remain rather general in this situation. But because, as I told you, because of this intervention of foreign states in what was, at the very beginning, a non-international armed conflict, we can say today that the conflict has been internationalized. And I repeat, it's not because of the intervention of the Islamic State, of Daesh, that the conflict became international. It's because the intervention of foreign states as such. Now, as far now that we have defined the context, the nature of the conflict, we can see what is the applicable law. Well, as I told you, Syria is bound by the Geneva Conventions of 1949. It is bound by these conventions since 1953. It's also bound by the first protocol, which is additional to these conventions, and it's bound by the protocol since 1983. And therefore, you have also all rules of international humanitarian law which apply in this conflict. And it's necessary for me to make a long demonstration in order to see that, in fact, international humanitarian law is far from being respected. And you have a lot of violations, not only because prisoners are tortured or they are killed like that, without any kind of due process. And consequently, it's quite clear that there are a lot of violations of IHL for international humanitarian law. More especially, you have the bombardments, the bombings, which make a lot of civilian victims, and even if the objectives which were attacked were military objectives, it doesn't really matter because the number of collateral casualties, the number of civilian victims is so huge that even if these victims can be considered as collateral damages, however, the number of civilian victims is much too high that we could not say that there are huge, very huge violations of IHL in the conduct of hostilities. And you have a number of rules, more especially Article 51 of the first additional protocol, which requires that civilians must be respected. This provision is abundantly violated during the conflict. Now, another aspect of the legal questions is a question to know whether the foreign interventions, the state interventions, are allowed in this conflict. And in fact, well, firstly, you could ask the question whether a civil strife is allowed, whether is a civil war allowed. Well, in fact, international law is more or less neutral from this point of view. If resort to force, if the use of force is totally prohibited in international law, it is for the essential, it is in international relations. In other words, between states. A state cannot attack another state. I refer you to Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter, which is the main rule in this. And you have not exactly the same kind of rule for a revolution. However, it's not allowed also to say that a revolution is allowed. Because in fact, according to the law, to the UN law, and I would more precisely say according to the UN practice, you have a number of resolutions which always prevail, which always consider that the resort to force, use of force, should not be force should not be used in order, for instance, to overthrow a government. However, we can't say that you have really a formal rule which prohibits revolution as such. It's very difficult to prove that. But you have a number of sides in resolutions of the General Assembly which show that clearly, well, it's quite normal, of course, the General Assembly of the United Nations prefer the negotiations, the negotiating processes to the use of force, even on a domestic level, even in the internal level. Now, concerning the question of the lawfulness, of the legality of the foreign interventions, and I refer to state interventions, normally, in principle, use of force in public international law is allowed only in two cases. Well, I could say three cases. First case, in case of self-defense. Second case, with the authorization of the Security Council. I refer to Article 58 of the UN Charter. And the third situation, which today is more or less anachronic, it's liberation movement. I'm referring to movements which fight against a colonial power or a racist power or a power or an occupying power. But there remains very, very few situations which today still fall under this qualification, under this consideration of the situations where, for instance, of course, the occupation of Palestine by Israel, or the occupation of Western Sahara by Morocco, but it's more or less the only situations which still appear to be in the framework of the rules I just mentioned. Then we come back to the possibility of an authorization which would have been given by the Security Council. And in fact, you have no real authorization given by the Security Council to the states which intervened in the Syrian conflict. But however, you have some resolutions, the wording of which can be considered as a kind of authorization. And I'm referring here to Resolution 2254 of 18 December 2015, where the Security Council asks member states to prevent and suppress Daesh terrorism, as well as al-Nusra and al-Qaeda terrorism. And here I quote, but I have not the English text, I have only the French-speaking text, so I'm going to translate immediately from French to English, between quotation marks. I quote, to eliminate the sanctuary that these movements, Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, to eliminate the sanctuary that these movements have established on a big part of the Syrian territories. You saw them on the map, which is on the screen. And the Security Council adds that the ceasefire, which has been requested by the Security Council in the conflict, this ceasefire, I quote against, shall not apply to offensive and defensive actions which are directed against individuals, groups, entities, movements, which are, as I just said, these terrorist movements. In other words, the Security Council accepts the use of force against this movement, even if this use of force is made not by Syria itself, but by foreign states. And this use of force takes place on the Syrian territory. And for the rest of the conflict, the resolutions ask all the parties to stop, to end the hostilities, and to continue to go on with the political process, with negotiations between the Syrian government and the opposition. And that is, for the time being, the situation considered just from a legal point of view. I thank you for your attention.
Is there anybody having a problem with English before I start? Or do we do the whole thing in English? Problems? Raise your hand if you must. No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. David and Mr. Salman, for your bright presentations. Now is the time for your questions. Als jullie vragen in het Nederlands of in het Frans willen stellen, is het ook mogelijk. En français ou néerlandais, les questions sont si possibles. Pardon? Oui, on essaiera de traduire. Dus als jullie comfortabel zijn in een bepaalde taal dat niet Engels is, gaan we proberen dat in het Engels te vertalen. Een eerste vraag om te beginnen? Een first question? Oui.
Moi, c'est une question à M. Salman. Vous avez parlé de l'unité européen, tenter de montrer à niveau occidentaux qu'il y avait une révolution pacifique. Moi, j'avais vu un film qui disait en fait que c'était une aspiration de nos dirigeants occidentaux qui, justement, avaient l'impression d'avoir raté les printemps arabes en Tunisie, en Libye, et ils voulaient un peu se rattraper, je pense notamment à Syrie, un peu se rattraper sur la situation syrienne, et en essayant vraiment d'apporter cette image de révolution syrienne faite par des civils, comme on a vu en Tunisie, en Égypte, et en Libye, en tout cas en Tunisie, Égypte et au Yémen. Ma question, vous avez dit au départ qu'il n'y avait pas de révolution en Syrie. Moi, justement, dans ce film, il disait que dès le début des luttes envers Bachar al-Assad, il y avait des djihadistes. Donc, je voulais vous poser la question, est-ce que, donc, il y a 5 ans, est-ce que dès le départ, il y avait des djihadistes et que ces médias occidentaux, par peut-être un lien avec les dirigeants, ont voulu montrer, en tout cas, nous jeter la poudre aux yeux de cette révolution civile et pacifique.
Okay, that's one translation for you. He said that he saw a film in which you saw, the governments having a certain sense of a failure to the Arab Spring in all other countries, and that they wanted to get themselves up and get work for their money in Syria, and that in this film there was also and it was also produced by the media, I understood correctly. There was also the warning that there were jihadist groups in those liberation forces. The question is then, did the media deliberately cover up in association with all the governments of the Western countries, or was it that there wasn't any jihadist at the first time and that we just ignored evolution from then on of jihadist forces until it went full blown?
I agree with you. There is some media speak about jihadists inside the revolution and Syria. I agree with you. There is some media. I speak about major media. The media who control the major opponent of people. And this major media or big media, they said there were no jihadists. And for Syria, we speak about Arab Spring, it started in Tunisia, okay, it was a revolution in Egypt, and after that it's complete in Syria. Why in Syria there were no revolution, real revolution? Because the people who moved in Syria, the majority of them, they want Islamic State. Syrian people is secular. They are not stupid to change, let's say, dictator, secular dictator in Islamic, terrorist, radical dictator. So for this reason, the people in Syria didn't support the revolution in that times. For the media, I agree with you, some media, but unfortunately not big media, they said there is a jihadist in Syria. There were jihadists. But most of this media also didn't speak about that. And recently, before 1 or 2 years, after this jihadist returned from Syria to here, and they became dangerous for security, national security of this country.
François, ils disent que la majorité des Syriens n'étaient pas. Another question? Yes.
Thank you both for your presentation. I have a question about maybe a personal feeling. When you left Syria, could you say that there were already tensions or that the government was in a kind of dead end and that in that way jihadists had it more easily to make, I wouldn't say then revolution, but to act and to change maybe the political model?
In fact, in that times, 2010 and 2011, also until 2013, I didn't believe jihadists could do any problem in Syria because the number of jihadists in Syria is so low. Less than 5% of Syrians, they are maybe radical. But most of Syrians, they are secular. So I didn't believe that. But this small number, they didn't be able to do change in Syria. So they have been supported from outside. Jihadists in Syria, we speak about 70,000 jihadists from the war travel to Syria. 70,000, sorry. Army of Belgium is 17,000. We speak about 70,000 jihadists. Honestly, for me, it was very difficult for me in that time to believe this small number, or even if they supported it, will do a big problem or change the government and say, but they really received really big support by a lot of the government. Especially here I speak about government, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkish, even America and France. America and France, they support them directly or indirectly in one way or others. Unfortunately, we are in a big problem in Syria. We speak about 12 million, maybe more, 13 million of refugees. And what's funny now, the media, they focus about this refugee. Oh, there is a lot of refugees in Belgium, there's a lot of refugees in Europe. In all of Europe, there are just 1 million Syrian refugees. But inside Syria, there are more than 8 million refugees. People travel from here to here, and from here to here. So in this part of Syria, there are 8 million refugees. This is one part of Syria. Besides the original people, which are, let's say, 7 or 8 million. So here in this area, there are most of Syria, in fact. And nobody speaks about this refugee speak just about refugees around Syria. They are 3 million maybe, and they speak about 1 million in Europe. And they are a lot, but here, what's happened, nobody cares about. Now the situation in Syria is very difficult, especially for economy. In Syria, in 80s or 90s, electricity comes at 24 hours. I never remember in my life, maybe 1 or 2 times that there is cut in electricity or cut in water, there is no water in the houses. Now, the water is 2 hours every day. Electricity maybe 1 hour, maybe every 2 days, you can find it 1 hour. You know how much the situation, how difficult it is. Here I speak about this part in Syria and the government, which is the best part now in Syria, at least security. If you compare it with the other part, where there is no security and no electricity and nothing.
I have a question for you. Thanks for the presentation. You said now we should apply the international humanitarian law because now it's an international problem. But who is controlling that this law is being followed? This international law.
It's difficult. Yes.
Yes, a classic question. But you're right, of course. Well, the kind of control of the correct application of IHL, in fact, depends on the international community. In fact, you have either could have as a kind of official organs who can express their point of view on the respect of these rules. You have, of course, the ICRC. But the ICRC is not the kind of fact-finding commission. In fact, I am a member of a fact-finding commission which is provided for by Article 90 of the first additional protocol. Unfortunately, this commission is a ghost commission, because no state has ever asked it to do something, because in fact our jurisdiction depends on the agreement of both belligerents, and this nearly never happens. Once it happens, and I was lucky enough to be a part of a verification mission which was led in the Philippines between at the time of the conflict between the Moro-Islamic Liberation Front and the Philippines government. But it's really, that was the first time, as far as I know, it's the first time in all the history of international relations that two belligerents accept to entrust a third party. In this case, it was Geneva Call. It's a Swiss association which was entrusted with the task of saying whether the Moro-Islamic Liberation Front had used or not anti-personnel landmines in the conflict with the armed forces of Philippines. But that's really exceptional. It's the exception which confirms the rule that you are never asked to do that. But otherwise, you have the Council of Human Rights frequently establish fact-finding commissions, ad hoc fact-finding commissions, in order to see if IHL or human rights have been respected in one situation or another. For instance, you had the Goldstone Commission after the Gaza War of 2008 to 2009, and the Operation Cast Lead by Israel. There was a commission, an investigation commission, which was made, which was entrusted with the task to say if violations of IHL had been committed or not.
So, but if I'm correct, once a conflict is made international, it's really difficult to un-internationalize it, because the ones who involve, the other countries who involve in the international fight, are international, and then you have the ones who have to control it are also international. So once a conflict becomes international, it's almost impossible to reduce it back again to the state, fight, to a domestic fight. Is that true, or are it still ways out of the international business?
But I don't really understand what you mean by saying that once the conflict is international, it's difficult to make it domestic. That's what you mean?
Yeah. So you said it started as a conflict only in Syria, only with actors from Syria itself, yes. And it's only when another state involved, it became international. But then you have the other state who is international, and you have the ones controlling if the human rights are respected. They're all international, so once a conflict becomes international, you can't reduce it anymore.
No, I understand what you mean. But you must not forget, the problem, the question that you are raising is in fact the problem of international law in general, not only IHL or human rights. In fact, the fact is that you must not forget that the world is not a kind of super state. It's not the city. We have not the monde cité, but I translate a maxim from the French, which can be said that the world of cities is not become the city's world. In other words, we remain in a world where states are different, are all different, and in fact, to check, to control the right application of international law depends on the states themselves, in fact. But you have a kind of supervision through international organizations like the United Nations, for instance, or other regional organizations. It's like the League of Arab States, or the African Union, or the Organization of American States, etc., for their own sphere of influence. That is all. But you can't compare the situation of the world with the situation of a state.
Just I will answer you shortly. Just you should think who put the international law in the world. If you think, just we discover the great power, great country, America, Russia, China, England. And look now, the international law now is controlled by Security Council. What's the Security Council? Security Council is 5 countries who win the Second World War. And now they seek to change this Security Council to put another great power, because now we have new great power like Brazil, maybe Germany should be part of Security Council. But in that times it was great power but lose the war. So the international law in general has been put by great power. If this great power agree for one thing or agree to solve one problem, it will be solved. If this great power don't agree or they have conflict, so this problem will complete or one of them will be. I could give you examples. For example, in Rwanda, when great power agree this war should finish, they sent all of them soldiers to finish this. Another example, in Iraq, they have conflict. But in that times, the law could be created by Russia or by America. America was the strongest. It's solved as America would like. Now in Syria, there is conflict. They would like to create international law, but it's not possible because there is like balance between the great power. So this problem will not solve now. Until they agree together this great power. And I could explain to you just something. I'm doctor in international relations. Do you know what's an international relation? International relation is the relation between great powers. Believe me, the small country is just a small player to complete the game. This is, I give you this word I heard from a big professor in international relations.
But don't forget, on the other side, that international law is not only what the Security Council says. You have in fact thousands and thousands of treaties which are concluded by states, or between two states, and of course it has nothing to do with the Security Council, and it's a part of international law. You know, for instance, just in Belgium, and I think in Belgium, we ratify a treaty every week with a lot of states. So, in fact, you must not be too simplistic.
Yeah, but I think this is like not something that we look at law, not international law. I speak here about Security Council, about the decision from control of the war. In general, it has been created by great powers. Of course, each country could create some regulation, but for me, this is not really. This is a good religion.
Questions for Mr. David. We had a conference of the ULB about Daesh last Wednesday, and also the speakers agreed that it is difficult to judge the situation because it is difficult to be on field in Raqqa to judge actually the effect of Daesh. But they were all agreed that if we measure the human loss caused by Daesh, they're actually by the Syrian government, they're actually 5 times bigger than those caused by Daesh. How do you react to that? And another question to Mr. David. Is there a legal way to intervene in this certain conflict? And are you actually, what's your opinion of the fact of intervening military to resolve the conflict?
Concerning your last question, I think I answered it in my presentation by the fact that, in fact, you have no condemnation of the foreign interventions in this conflict, because I think that there is a kind of consensus on the international level concerning the fact that it's really necessary to eliminate Daesh and, in general, terrorist movements. And you see, when the Security Council says that states can go on to use force against these, between quotation marks, sanctuaries in Syria, where the terrorist movements like Daesh or al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda are. So it's a real legal authorization to go and to fight against these movements. Concerning the first part of your question, I don't really catch what you meant.
I said they were like, you actually answered the first part of my question, and the second part was like, what is your opinion to resolve the conflict by intervening military?
I think, you know,
I mean,
my opinion is rather simple, in fact. To resolve this conflict, you know, it's very funny because these dictators, and I agree with the other speaker that Bashar al-Assad is not the only dictator of the region. But it's terrible because these dictators are like children. When they have power, they want to keep it. They are like children, they don't want to lend their toys to other children. And they want to keep them for them. No, you can't play with my revolver or with my bow or with my puppets, and it's what you like. They are real children. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. When you have a child like that, well, he goes to bed and he doesn't have any desert, of course, because he's like that. He's a bad boy. He must not stay at the table, in other words. But that's terrible. So, no, from a realistic point of view, I think that today I would be in favor of a political process, of a negotiation process, because even if it's true that facts which have been committed, namely by the Syrian government, by the Syrian regular troops, are war crimes or crimes against humanity, and if it's true that the main leaders of Syrian governments should be judged for that in the framework of the fight against impunity, for the time being what is the most urgent thing is to end the conflict and to find a solution which in fact at this stage I suppose it would be a kind of utopia to think that it's possible to deal with this question without Bashar al-Assad. I think that he must be a part of the solution, even if afterwards he could be judged for his responsibility in the crimes which have been committed. But for the time being, what is the most important is to save lives of people who are still alive and to stop the conflict. And I would say at any price.
Okay, and you think we can actually negotiate with the Islamic State? You were talking about negotiations.
With the Islamic State,
yeah.
But I think that even with the Islamic State, it would be preferable to negotiate rather than to fight at the first stage, because they don't want to negotiate. So anyway, it's a dead end. Unfortunately, there is no solution there, and consequently, unfortunately, I think that against the Islamic State, probably that force is the only solution. That's terrible to say, but you know, when people of the Islamic State are prepared to commit suicide themselves, you can understand that it's very difficult to discuss with these people.
I will explain something. Unfortunately, until now, there is no serious decision to finish Islamic State. Honestly, around the world. I said to you, international law created by Great Power. Until now, there is no agreement for Great Power to finish Islamic State. And here, I could say, for policy, for America, for example, there is something that's named the small enemy and the biggest enemy. Here we should remember what's happened in Afghanistan. Taliban is the small enemy. Terrorists, okay. But Soviet Union is the biggest enemy. No problem if you support terrorists against Soviet Union. Now in Daesh also, Daesh is not the biggest enemy yet in Syria. So no problem if Daesh stay a little bit and do something to make the biggest enemy or the bigger enemy suffer a little bit. So until now, there is no serious decision around the world to finish Daesh.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. David and Mr. Salman for giving this, I should say, this meeting. I would like to convey, I would like to say concur with your worries about Syria and its comparison with Afghanistan. If I may quote in your study, Syria offers a complete déjà vu of pre-9/11 Afghanistan under the Taliban, and I will go on. Abandoning Afghanistan after the withdrawal of Soviet forces in 1989, and it's already happening right now, by the way, is usually considered a solely American folly, but in the case of Syria, the burden will be shared by many EU countries, the United States, and also the other Middle East neighbors, such as Israel, Turkey, Jordan, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Now, my quick question, I actually have two questions, one for Mr. Salman and one for Mr. David. First one, Mr. Salman, we know that these talks are now ongoing again in Geneva. Rumor has it that for now, the so-called solution is to make up a certain federal Syria, which I should say is just a partition, honestly, rather than a federalization, in which the area between Latakia and Damascus will go to Assad, the regime, and the area in the north of Rojava will be given to the Kurds, and the rest will be given to Sunnis, and they will sort themselves out how to fight the so-called Islamic State or Daesh. My question is, do you agree with this so-called proposition? My question the question, Mr. David, is we have seen numerous times that the United Nations has, sorry for the word, but has failed to make up a lasting peace plan for certain conflicts. We just saw the Gulf War, we just saw the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. Some say that the United Nations is momentarily being reduced to the League of Nations, which has been established on World War II. So I mean, the United Nations is going back to its previous form, in which these are made up by countries which are winning the war, which are won the war, in this case World War II. Do you agree with the criticism on the United Nations on this matter?
Do I agree with what?
The criticism.
Okay.
For federal, in fact, I don't agree. I don't like this idea, because if we look now on the map of Syria, we see here the government, here Jabhat al-Nusra, here Daesh, here Qud. But if we think about federal in general, federal government should be legal government, all of them. Here, for the Kurd now, I have from Syria, I have connected. Kurd now kill all Arab here, and kill all Christian and push them out of this area. Here, Syrian government kill off all of radical people and push them out of this area. Here, you have Jabhat al-Nusra kill everybody and push it out of the area. Daesh is the same. So, how will we have a government with responsible for this and this and this? We should have, okay, if it's federal, okay, federal legal government, federal responsible leader, not federal moreover, no one of this group accepts that. For example, Islamic State now want Islamic State government speak about state from Europe and Asia. They don't want to stop these people. The same for al-Nusra, they are part of Al-Qaeda, and you know Al-Qaeda idea. So how will we put government with these people? I don't think it's possible, or it's possible solution. I think the only solution is to work against these terrorists. This is something very important. For Kurd, we can speak with them. We can, yes, they could be part of the federal or new government, but for the others, I don't think that.
Yes, about the criticism that you could send to the United Nations. I could answer you by trying to repeat what my former professor of international law said about the United Nations. He said that United Nations are like every one of us between heaven and hell. And if the United Nations did not exist, it's like God. We should invent it. And better are the speeches under the sunlight than the silence of the graves under the moonlight. So even if the United Nations seem to be a failure, but it's not a failure, because there is a lot of things that the United Nations succeeded in doing, in fact, in our world. But even if there are a lot of failures, however, it would not be a reason to throw to the garbage the United Nations.
Thank you for your response. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time to answer questions, because the second workshop should begin just about now. So we'll thank Mr. Salman and Mr. David for coming, and thank you for coming too. Now I think we'll pause for some minutes and second workshop.
What's the first?
Yeah.